Getting drunk for weeks, insulting people over the radio, sleeping in the car, not giving a damn about the rules, and wrecking cars. This is the story of a Formula 1 driver who never listened to anyone in his life, cold as ice in front of the cameras, but warm as fire when there is a party to be had. I'm not talking about just any driver, but I'm talking about the last man to bring the Formula 1 World Championship to Ferrari's home. Kimi Raikkonen was born on October 17, 1979 in Espoo, Finland. He makes his first experience in karts from the age of 8, but without too much pressure. Let's just say he was having fun. He made his single-seater debut 12 years later, in 1999, when he participated in the British Formula Renault Championship. And already the following year, he wins the championship. In fact, he wins it outright. Out of 10 races, he wins 7, with 7 pole position and 6 fastest laps. In the same year, he also races in the International Formula Renault, getting 2 wins, 2 poles and 2 fastest laps. 13 wins out of 23 races. He wins more than half of the races he participates in. And if you think that on karts he was just having fun. And here comes the opportunity of a lifetime right away. Ferrari is scheduled to test in Mugello. With them is Sauber, also powered by Ferrari. Peter Sauber, after talking to Raikkonen managers, wanted to test Kimi. During the 3-day test, Kimi's name does not appear on the screen, but instead a pseudonym, Eskimo. Okay, but why? That's pretty simple. If other teams had been interested in him by seeing him drive, they couldn't have contacted him in any way, not knowing who that driver was. That's brilliant. Okay, but why just Eskimo? Because it was the Finnish ice cream brand that was funding Kimi's test. Yes, exactly. Don't think that those tests were free. That day was also racing Enric Bernoldi, strongly wanted by Red Bull, which was sponsoring Sauber in those years. But that day there was no story. Raikkonen was running fast. Just think that Kimi is going so fast that Michael Schumacher, after finding himself in front of him, comes back to the pits and asks, "But who's that kid going so fast?" And if Schumacher said so, Kimi that day impresses everyone, despite serious neck problems suffered due to the high stresses of the single-seater, to which he was not used. Just imagine that he couldn't do more than 3 laps in a row without needing the physiotherapist. But even in just those 3 laps, Peter Sauber is captivated by the speed of the young man with ice-colored eyes. Not only that, also striking is his temperament. Glacial, focused, determined, and speaks little. It almost seemed like to bother him to express himself. But when he does open his mouth, he gives important directions to the technicians and hits all the team's expectations. Schumacher himself told the Sauber engineer at the end of the testing he will be very fast. Peter Sauber is really convinced of his talent. So much that he offers him a seat for the 2001 season. And he even went against a certain Helmut Marko, a talent scout for Red Bull, who kept pushing to place instead Bernoldi. But in front of the stopwatch, he cannot object, and Raikkonen in the end is hired. Just think that this single episode, combined with other considerations, convinced the Red Bull management to invest in a team of their own. So Raikkonen finds himself literally thrown into Formula 1 after just 23 races in the minor championship, and not even in the top ones. I don't know if you got it right. He didn't even do Formula 3 and Formula 3000, which was equivalent to today's Formula 2. But there is a problem. Kimi does not have the super license needed to race in Formula 1. And so, to get him started in 2001 World Championship, FIA decides to grant him a provisional super license, valid just for the first 6 races. If he kept a good conduct on the track, without creating problems or incident, he would get the permanent renewal. If not, otherwise, go home. You can imagine that the debut in Australia is therefore vital for Kimi. And you can imagine that all this pressure made him very nervous and tense. So tense that he falls asleep a few minutes before the start. Yeah, you read that right. It seems that Kimi, at his first Grand Prix in Formula 1, with the temporary license and everyone's eyes on him, fell asleep half an hour before the start. The engineers were looking for him for the lineup lap, and they found him snoring in the back box. Well, that nap definitely does him good. Starting P13, after a solid, consistent and near-perfect race, he finishes the race in a wonderful 6th place, grasping the first world point in his debut in Formula 1. Okay, it's true, ahead of him there were 5 DNFs. But if in your first Formula 1 race, in Australia, you start 13th and finish P6, make no mistakes and don't crash and keep your cool, that means you're talented. Just those numbers were enough to convince the FIA to grant him a permanent super license as early as the next race. Kimi that day became a full-time Formula 1 driver. His first season is solid. He does not disfigure, even with his teammate, the more experienced Nick Heidfeld, which was the 1999 Formula 3000 champion, and he even seizes 2 fourth places in Austria and Canada, finishing P10 in the championship with 9 points. And what about the crashes? I mean, when does the first big one come? In Suzuka, Kimi loses the rear in a fast corner and is hit by Alice Jordan, which sends him crashing violently into the barriers. Big scare, but fortunately no consequences. In a world like Formula 1, when you are that fast and astound anyone who has seen you drive live, it is natural to attract the stares of the big fishes. That year, Mika Hakkinen had decided to retire. A replacement was needed, and what a better opportunity than another fast fit. Just think that Ron Dennis at the beginning of the season had come out against Raikkonen's debut with these words: "I don't want young talent with so little experience coming into Formula 1. And now, to having on McLaren team, he is spending a whopping 50 million euros. Hakkinen leaves, Raikkonen arrives. The first season with the Silver Arrows is good, as Kimi seizes 4 podiums, 3-time third and 1 second, and proves significantly faster than his teammate Coulthard. However, the championship ends him in 6th place with only 24 points. And the question is, why so few points? Well, you can blame the tame retirements in the season, mainly due to mechanical failures. And keep this detail in mind, because we'll come back to it later. 2003 turns out to be a great year for Raikkonen. 4 podiums in the first 4 Grand Prix, and among them comes his first victory. In Malaysia, he's the author of a monstrous race. Starting 7th, he goes on to win with a 39 seconds gap on Rubens Barrichello and even 1 minute and 4 seconds on Paulman Alonso. Throughout the whole season, Kimi is very fast, getting 10 podiums and only 3 retirements. And just think that year he comes this close to the world title against Schumacher, losing it by only 2 points. At this point, we can easily say that the next one will be the good year. That's what everyone thought. Well, 5 DNFs in the first 7 races, including 3 in the first 3 races. That was a year to forget. If it were not for the only positive note, which is the second victory in his career, obtained in Spa, the University of Formula 1. 2005 also starts badly, but then the season turns. 7 wins and 12 total podiums. Again, he will lose the world title, this time to Alonso, but he proves to be a lightning bolt. In Japan, he made an incredible feat, starting P7 and taking an incredible win. That was a huge comeback in one of the best races of his career. And the question you're probably asking right now is, why? If he was going so fast, if he's so good, he still couldn't win a world championship? The answer was simple: technical problems. This image speaks for itself. Failure of a suspension in the Nürburgring Grand Prix caused by strong tire vibrations while he was leading the race, and just think, it was the last lap. Also in 2006, so many problems. Not a single victory, and he finishes P5 in the championship. And how did he react at this point? Well, at some point he began to take the problem philosophically. Monte Carlo, lap 51, his McLaren catches fire. A normal driver would have returned to the pits, do a brief debriefing, or maybe go to the motorhome, slamming the door, pissed as hell. Well, Kimi, on the other hand, gets out of the car, heads straight to his yacht docked nearby. Still with the racing suit and helmet on, he changes outfit, beer in hand, and enjoys the rest of the race. To the reporters, he later says, "The boat was closed and my race was over. What's the big deal?" And does this remind you of anyone? Beer aside, it is clear that this cannot go on. And it is precisely in this moment that comes the turning point in Kimi Raikkonen's career. The life-changing call, the red-collared call. From 2007, Kimi Raikkonen will be a Ferrari driver. And if once before Kimi had replaced the big world champion, Mika Hakkinen, this time he will replace someone even bigger, someone who has won 7 world championships. Raikkonen, in fact, will inherit Michael Schumacher's seat. This time he must have had an incredible pressure on him. Sure, the one who falls asleep in the first Formula 1 race. And speaking of Schumacher, 2006 was the year of his first retirement in Formula 1. And at the last race in Brazil, the soccer legend Pelé presents the German with the Lifetime Achievement Award. The ceremony was a big one, attended by all the drivers, except one. Guess who is missing? That's right. That night, Kimi Raikkonen could not be found. Shortly afterwards, Martin Brundle, also a former Formula 1 driver, joins him to ask him why he was missing. And Kimi, in front of the cameras, replies,
Kimi, you missed the presentation by Pele.
I was having a shit.
Okay.
Now, do you remember the constant mechanical problems suffered by Raikkonen in McLaren? Well, after the announcement of his move to Ferrari, a Mercedes motorist, Mario Irlen, who supplies powertrain to McLaren, drops a bombshell that alarms Ferrari. Maranello will have to build a tank for Kimi, because he only wants to go full throttle and everything else doesn't interest him. No other driver treats the material as hard as he does. No one else goes hitting the curbs lap after lap as he does. And that is a bomb. Are you saying that McLaren broke down often because it had problems? Or did it break down often because Kimi Raikkonen was too aggressive? Raikkonen, a phenomenon or a single-seater destroyer? Well, to get the answer, one simply has to wait. Fortunately, Ferrari proves to be more reliable than McLaren, and the championship gets off to a great start, and Kimi, on his debut in Australia, gets pole position, fastest lap of the race, and victory in the first race with this new car. Just think that a similar debut in Ferrari history only succeeded to two drivers, a certain Juan Manuel Fangio and Nigel Mansell. However, Raikkonen had some failure there too. For example, in Spain, an electrical failure forced him to retire, while in Monaco he finished only P8, also due to a mistake of his qualifying that made him start from the back. But since mid-season, Kimi Raikkonen maintained a very high standard. Another DNF suffered in Nürburgring, however, takes him far away from the world title fight. And with just 2 races to go, the points gap to Lewis Hamilton is 17. Lewis could win his first World Championship in Formula 1 on the debut, ironically on that very McLaren just left by Kimi Raikkonen to chase the rainbow dream in Ferrari. And just remember that at the time the points were different than nowadays. The winner did not take 25 points, but only 10. You can understand that a gap of 17 points in just 2 races seems impossible to recover. Kimi Raikkonen, however, believes in it, and he will surely give his all to leave no stone unturned. At the penultimate race in China, the one in which Raikkonen would have to pull off a miracle to reopen the games, he finds himself starting second behind Hamilton. Lewis would only need to score a few points to win the World Championship. It seems to be already done for the Englishman, until at the moment of re-entering the pits, Hamilton makes an unforgivable mistake. He makes a mistake at the entrance of the pit lane and runs into the sand. Race over. Like that, Kimi Raikkonen wins, and the World Championship is reopened. We then arrive to the last race in Brazil with the chilling standings. Hamilton 107 points, Alonso 103, and Raikkonen 100. 2 McLaren drivers lead the World Championship, Raikkonen behind them. The points gap is still 7, which is a lot. Only a miracle would let Raikkonen win the championship. In qualifying, Felipe Massa comes out on top, 2nd Hamilton, 3rd Raikkonen, and 4th Alonso. At the start, Kimi immediately passes Hamilton. The Englishman also gets caught off guard by Alonso, his teammate and arch enemy on the track. Hamilton is furious and attempts an attack as early as turn 4. He goes wide, however, re-entering in 8th place. What just seems to be an easy matter for Lewis, bringing home a few points and winning the World Championship on the debut, turns into a nightmare. Nightmare that gets even worse, because a few laps later, his McLaren gearbox goes crazy. Car is running slowly, and he re-enters 18th. By now, just a miracle can save Hamilton. The furious comeback begins. Meanwhile, the 2 Ferraris lead the race, with Massa ahead of Kimi. But in 3rd position is Alonso, who by doing so finds himself virtually champion. But after the pit stop dance, Raikkonen gains 1st place, which was the smartest move from Ferrari. That is the best he can do. The only hope for Raikkonen is to see how the others close. Alonso must finish at least 2nd to win the World Championship, Hamilton at least 5th. Checker flag, Raikkonen wins the Grand Prix. In 2nd place, Felipe Massa, then Fernando Alonso, then Rosberg, and 5th, Robert Kubica. Hamilton is only 7th, and Kimi Raikkonen is world champion by a single point over Hamilton and Alonso, who finished the championship tied. That was incredible. World champion in his 1st season in Ferrari. It's time to celebrate, but there was a problem. After the podium celebration comes terrible news for Kimi. The Williams and BMW gasoline temperatures may be too low, and they risk disqualification. This would cause Hamilton to gain 3 positions in the standings, and therefore he will become the world champion. That would be a mockery for Kimi Raikkonen. The race officials, however, acquit the two teams, and Kimi is finally a world... not yet. In fact, McLaren is appealing the non-disqualification of Williams and BMW from the Brazilian Grand Prix, an appeal that goes nowhere. The FIA Court of Appeal rejects the appeal, and almost a month after the Brazilian race, Kimi Raikkonen is officially world champion. A success as unexpected as it was incredible. Winning the world title in red is something magical for a driver. And that was for Kimi too, who on this occasion indulges in sentimentality. It is very difficult to explain what I feel. It's an incredible emotion. I want to thank the team for everything they have done during this year. Even when we went through some difficult times and were given up for dead, we never gave up, and that commitment today had its reward. Thanks also go to my parents, my wife Jenny, and everyone who believed in me. I have achieved what I have been chasing a long time. A Ferrari, I found a great family, and I'm proud to have won the title together with them. And right on the podium in Brazil, you can guess why Kimi is nicknamed Iceman. Just imagine, you have just won a world championship, the first one of your career. You did it with Ferrari, a team for which all drivers dream of racing. You won by a whisker after a very intense season, and at that point anyone would burst with joy. Anyone except Raikkonen, who arrives on the top step, lazily raises his arms, drinks a shot of champagne, even before the finish line starts, and shortly afterwards catches a timid hand salute. And in the end, not a liberating shout, a huge smile, nothing at all. Just think that on the podium Alonso was laughing more, perhaps happier to see Hamilton lose than sad that he lost the World Championship. And for these very aspects, he's known as Iceman, a nickname given to him by Ron Dennis back in his days in McLaren. Always unflappable in front of the cameras, almost bored by whatever was happening. If he won, he complimented the team on the car. If something went wrong, he would say what had gone wrong, not a word more. 2008, Raikkonen could reconfirm himself as world champion. Hamilton could instead win his first world championship. But Raikkonen fails to reconfirm the speed of the year before, because this will be the year of Felipe Massa, the year in which Felipe will bring the world championship back to Maranello, but just for a few seconds. That famous Interlagos race in which everyone believed that Massa won the world championship, until Hamilton passed Glock at the last corner and became the world champion. Just think, ironically, the Brazilian driver will lose the title to Lewis by only 1 point, almost a photocopy of the previous year, but with different characters and opposite outcome. 2009 will be even worse, almost disastrous for Raikkonen, who ends the season in 6th place with just 1 win and 4 more podiums. It is also a black year for Ferrari and Massa, the victim in Hungary of a frightening accident that threatens to cost him life. In qualifying, a spring broke loose from a bar and struck him squarely on the helmet, causing him a bone injury and a concussion. He spent several days in medical-induced coma, after which the good news: no irreversible damage. But the thing that always impressed me about Raikkonen was his personality. And let me tell you another anecdote. Malaysia. The race stopped due to very heavy rain. All the drivers remain waiting inside their cars. Of course, all except Kimi, who takes off the helmet, rushes into the Ferrari's box, and opens the fridge and eats an ice cream, accompanied by a Coke. What can you say to him? Absolutely nothing. Ron Dennis himself said in an interview that Kimi, probably in his life, has never listened to anyone. In addition to the hunger satiated by the ice cream, that was like the impression that Kimi was losing the hunger for victory, and with it, the motivation. And so, at the end of the season, Kimi announces his retirement for Formula 1 at just 30 years old, just to go to rally racing. And he didn't do it as a joke, he really missed business. And in 2010, he competed in the World Rally Championship with the Citroën sponsored by Red Bull. As much as the Finns have something in their DNA that makes them go fast in rallies, the WRC is tough, and so the results didn't come. Raikkonen ends the season in 10th place, and with just 5th place in Turkey as his best finish. Okay, that was not bad for a debut, but that was far from expectations. He does, however, achieve another record, because he is the first Finnish driver to score points in both Formula 1 and the WRC. Kimi wants to go big, and in 2011 he enters his own team in the WRC Championship with a Citroën DS3 supplied directly by the French manufacturer. The quasi-official support is not enough though. Raikkonen collects just a 10th place in the final standings. This is the end of the parentheses in the WRC. But Kimi still wants to race, and especially wants to try new things. At this point, he takes a bold step, trying his hand at a discipline that exudes motorsports to every inch of asphalt, but which is technically at the antipodes of anything he has never tried. Kimi is going to race in NASCAR. In fact, he finds a deal with Kyle Busch Motorsport to run a Championship World Truck Series race in Charlotte. For those who don't know, the Camping World Truck Series is a parallel series of NASCAR Cup Series. It is the only championship in the NASCAR ecosystem in which vehicles derived from the road series are raced. Basically, we're talking about oversized pickups that race around ovals across America at breakneck speeds. That's just beautiful. The debut is fantastic. Starting 31st, Kimi crosses the finish line in 15th position, finishing in the points in his first race. A few days later, he races again in Charlotte, this time in a real stock car from Joe Nemechek's team. However, the race does not go as planned. Kimi takes a penalty for speeding in pit lane and is also slowed down by a debris truck in front of his car, finishing the race in 27th place. However, he is well spoken in the environment, and his debut is considered very positive, so much that the possibility of building a future in the American series arises for Kimi. Unfortunately, none of this will come true. A few days after the Charlotte race, Kimi performs a test with the car from Robbie Gordon's team, which ends with Kimi destroying the car. The crash was probably caused by light rain that began to fall on track, to which Raikkonen gave no weight, but which is fatal for these cars. Probably because of the incident, or perhaps for other reasons, some sponsors who pledged to finance Kimi Raikkonen's new career backed out, and for him, this is the end of his dream. But not the end of his career, because for 2012, he announces a resounding comeback. In rallies? No, in Formula 1. After 3 years away from the top series, Kimi finds in Lotus a team ready to bet on him. And if you think he's back to cash in and end his career leaving the rear, well, you're wrong. After a complicated start, he even gets to mathematically fight for the world title, finishing 2012 in 3rd position and collecting 7 podiums with Lotus. Among them, a fantastic victory in the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. With these results, he contributed to Lotus' excellent 4th place in the construction standings. And just to give you an idea about how fast he was, in the end of the season, Kimi's point will be more than double that of his teammate Romain Grosjean. And speaking of Abu Dhabi, do you remember Kimi's team radio with the race wall? Kimi is playing for the win, and from the pits, they explain the situation to him.
Okay, Kimi, next car behind you is Alonso. I'll keep you updated on the gap. I'll keep you updated on the pace.
And Kimi? Does he say thank you? Well, no.
Just leave me alone, I know what to do.
And he did it well too, because he won that race. But first, he had time to rub the race wall once again, when they tell him,
Okay, Kimi, we need to keep working all 4 tyres, please.
and in response, he's heard by a very pissed off Kimi.
Yes, I'm doing all the time, so you don't have to remind every second.
Idle. One of Raikkonen's main characteristic is that he was not a non-drinker. We're talking about a Finn after all. Just think that after his 2nd place in Bahrain, the local prince invited him to celebrate. And it was a very sober celebration, which will last just 2 weeks. Well, actually, Kimi stays in Bahrain for over a week, celebrating and having a party, and then he flies to Helsinki in Finland to keep celebrating for another week. He then travels to Spain for the next Grand Prix, and talking about those days, Raikkonen himself claims to remember very little. After all, as he says, alcohol relieves stress. By the way, I don't know if you remember that "blah" expression with which he almost always began during interviews. It sounded like he wanted to belittle any topic put to him by journalists. Kimi was always a man of few words, and this may have deeper reasons. Kimi is dyslexic. Just imagine having this problem and always having to speak in front of journalists, in front of cameras, in front of the world, knowing that you have to measure your words, having to think several times about what word to use, knowing that everyone is ready to judge your statements. And that made me understand so many things about him. 2013 turned out to be good again. In Australia, he does something incredible. Starts P7 and makes another fantastic comeback. Victory and fastest lap. However, towards the end of the championship comes out the break. Actually, 2. In fact, he misses the last 2 races because of a back problem that forced him to have a surgery, and he separates, not without controversy, from Lotus, mainly because of unpaid salaries. And to think that if he had run the last races as well, he could have again finished 3rd in the championship. But even so, he already brings home 51 more points than his teammate, proving once again to be crucial for the 4th place in the constructor standings for Lotus. And so you can imagine that in this point, Kimi's adventure in Formula 1 once again comes to an end. Or maybe not. Well, for the following season, Kimi Raikkonen returns, guess what, in Ferrari, alongside with Alonso. With two such drivers, World Championship sides are inevitable. But hey, this is the modern era of Ferrari. The era in which tifosi have to suffer. 2014, a disaster for Ferrari, especially for Kimi. No podiums and just 55 points collected, less than a third as many as Alonso, who also finishes a winless year. Still, Raikkonen pulls out some flashes of class, such as his comeback in Hungary from 17th to P6. Another good race also in Spa, P4, ahead of his teammate for the first time. 2015, Alonso leaves and Vettel arrives. That's going to be a better year for the Ferrari. But anyway, nothing exciting. Kimi finishes P4 in the World Championship with just 3 podiums and no wins. A good 128 points behind his teammate, who even won 3 races. Raikkonen is definitely in a crisis of results. He cannot find the feeling with the Ferrari. Feeling that instead Sebastian Vettel had managed to find. And 2016 is almost a copy of 2015. 0 wins and just 4 podiums, with Vettel again ahead in the final standings. A crisis that continued in 2017, with Vettel always in front, almost touching the World Championship. 2018, however, is the year of rebirth. 12 podiums, with a stunning victory in America, which came after an impressive 114 races on the fast. He then returns to the podium in the final standings, in 3rd place. In Monza Grand Prix, however, he manages to set a great record, pole position with track record, and that became the lap with the highest average speed in the entire Formula 1 history. But once again, Sebastian Vettel does better than him, proving once again that he is the driver to bet on Ferrari for the world title. And at the end of the season, all the non-conformity of Kimi Raikkonen comes out. We are in the Formula 1 Grand Gala, an event as formal as it is boring for many people, but not boring for Kimi, who shows up on stage to collect an award completely drunk, with laughter, pats on the back to Vettel, and definitely little balance. Quite a sight, in the midst of all those plaster people, one of his idols is James Hunt. That was strange, isn't it? And so, for Kimi comes the time of a new separation from Ferrari. For the last 3 years in Formula 1, he will return to Sauber, which is now Alfa Romeo, which was the first stable to believe in his talents. With a mid-grade car, certainly no miraculous results can come. However, Kimi has still been able to put on a show in a few occasions. Like for example the superb first lap in the 2020 Portuguese Grand Prix. Kimi starts behind, only 17th, but from the start and throughout the first lap, he is unstoppable, overtaking everyone in front of him, up to 6th place under the finish line on the first lap. That was a monstrous comeback, showing once again Kimi's great talent. Spectacle not only on the track, but also on the radio. Bahrain, 2019. From the pit wall they ask him,
"How is the front wing? How is the front wing?"
And he replies,
I don't know, you have to tell me.
Turkey 2021. Kimi has problem with the hydration system.
I have water running in my fucking foot. Because your drinking system is leaking like fuck.
Austria 2021. The boxing form Kimi 3 track limits in the same corner.
Kimi, be careful, track limit, turn 10.
What? What do you mean?
You've been three times track limit, turn 10.
What the fuck did you tell me now? What the fuck did you tell me now? After third time, first time, you informed me.
Until in 2021, that icy Finn, beloved by all, announces his retirement for Formula 1, this time forever. Loved by all, yes, because he was a straightforward person. So straightforward that he seemed cocky and irreverent, but he was staying authentic. In addition to setting several records, among them he equaled Michael Schumacher's record for the 10 fastest lap race laps in a single season. But most importantly, Raikkonen has done it twice. 352 races, 21 wins, 103 podiums, 18 pole positions, and 46 fastest laps. Kimi Matthias Raikkonen, the latest hero, dressed in red.